Rainbow Dash heard the deafening boom in the sky and looked up to witness the falling moon. The monumental object was hurtling towards Equestria like an alabaster cannonball, and there was nothing Dash could do to stop it. She doubted there was anyone left who could, when to her surprise, a green beam shot out somewhere off the ground. A long streak of light zoomed towards the moon before making contact with its surface, sending a green shockwave that expanded from the point of impact like an incredible ring of beautiful, magical light. As soon as it made contact, the large orb that careened towards Earth began to slow its descent. Green clouds of magically charged moon dust were shooting away from the surface as the moon slowly, but surely, began to stop in its tracks. A sickening screech echoed across the land that sounded like an enormous clunk of metal being scraped against a chalkboard, as the reverberations from the immense seismic activity of the moon conducted through the beam before reverberating within the Earth. Dash looked down to observe the origin of the magical display, when she witnessed a tall, mismatched figure above the ruins of Canterlot, standing with his hand outstretched and a smile on his face. Dash saw him mouth a few words before he threw his head back in laughter, but whatever words he uttered were drowned out by the strenuous screech still pulsating throughout Equestria. Soon after the green beam had blasted from the ground, deep purple lightning exploded from somewhere around the mountain. It arced in large bolts, creating a jagged tree of electricity, branching out from the surrounding air like vines sprouting from the earth. Soon, a pitch-black wave of energy rocketed from the base of the position and the surface of the approaching lunar satellite, and made contact with the surface as well. There were black and green pulses of energy circling the moon as each party struggled to overcome the other for telekinetic control of the massive planet-like object. Rainbow Dash was in awe. Never had she witnessed such display of raw, unrestrained power. The moon that so gracefully adorned the night sky, and the very same moon she had gazed upon just a few nights before with Fluttershy, was caught in the largest power struggle the world was likely to ever witness. That reminded her. Fluttershy. Where was she? Dash prayed in her mind that the information Spike gave her was correct. She scanned the surface, trying her best to ignore the fighting for the moon above her, but the loud blasts and chaotic humming was very difficult to tune out. She struggled to focus her mind on what was below, frantically searching for a speck of yellow against the verdant green landscape, when she spotted her. Fluttershy was sitting against a large rock, staring up at the sky. Dash couldn't help but feel terrible. This shy, unsuspecting, and kind pony was just staring down a death, perpetrated in the most horrible way possible. Dash flew down to the yellow mare, ready to apologize for everything she'd done. Her teal hooves made contact with the soft grass as she approached Fluttershy. Dash had landed behind the yellow mare, and though she was unable to see her face, Rainbow was sure the little Pegasus was probably having an emotional breakdown, struggling to come to terms with her imminent death. Dash finally reached the yellow Pegasus, all ready to stare in her certainly distraught face, when the introvert mare turned her head and sent unnerving chills of confusion down Dash's spine. There was a sad smile on Fluttershy's lips, contradicting her crying eyes. Dash only stared at her pitifully as she tried to work out the complex and hopeless sadness that conflicted on her face, much like the two beings struggling for control over the moon. "It's a beautiful evening, isn't it?" said Fluttershy. Her voice was cracked and strained. Rainbow Dash opened her mouth to speak, but no words would come out. Instead, tears came flowing out of her own eyes as well, as she struggled to remain afloat in her droning tempest of guilt. "The way the moon looks in the sky, it reminds me of the sunset we spent on the clouds." Fluttershy's gaze never left the moon. The large object had slowed down exponentially, but it didn't look like it was going to stop in time. "I know why you've come," said Fluttershy. finally looking towards Dash. I know you've been looking for me, and I just want you to know. Fluttershy looked at Dash and took in a shaky breath, before uttering her next words in a shaky whisper. I'm sorry. Dash choked on her tears for words. No, Dash drew in a loud breath. I'm sorry. I haven't been able to think straight, knowing what I did to you. Fluttershy looked at Dash, her odd smile still persisting. It taught me an important lesson. Fluttershy used her hoof to wipe tears from her eyes. No matter what trials life puts us through. She looked towards the falling moon, as if it were an old friend. I know that in the end, I'll have you. If I had the choice to go back and change what happened that day, and erase the damage that had been done, I would choose to keep things as they are now. The words Fluttershy spoke resonated with Rainbow's heart, and soon she donned the same smile as Fluttershy. Dash looked into Fluttershy's eyes, when she noticed something she hadn't before. There was a small scar, just underneath her right eye, where a hard hoof had broken the soft skin on her face. Dash's memory was cast back to that pivotal moment that seemed so long ago. Several weeks earlier. Hey, Fluttershy! Dash exclaimed happily, as she opened the door to her cloud home. What took you so long? I was starting to think you weren't coming. Fluttershy had a troubled look on her face, and though she quickly smiled at her friend, it was still apparent that there was something wrong. The Yellow Mare opened her mouth to speak, but Dash had already started talking. Anyway, I was having a little trouble with Tank. He's been, well, acting differently. She began to walk away from the door, but Fluttershy had made no move to enter the house. Dash looked back, noticing her friend hadn't followed her inside, and with a strange face she called back. You all right? Dash asked, the tiniest note of suspicion embedded in her voice. Yes, blurted out Fluttershy awkwardly, before turning her head from Rainbow Dash. The teal Pegasus stared at the distressed mare, trying her best to piece together whatever it was that was troubling her. The mare's pupils began to shrink as she became conscious of Dash's suspicion, and she finally spoke. Where's the little tortoise anyway? Inside, and you're gonna have to walk into the house to see him. Oh, right. Fluttershy beat her head down with a sheepish smile as she quickly cantered into the low-lying abode. I guess Tank isn't the only one acting differently, Dash said dismissively before she guided Fluttershy to her kitchen. Fluttershy followed Dash, noticing the many items around her house. There were several pictures of her and Scootaloo, some photographs of the Wonderbolts, and a blue and white baseball cap sitting on a large coffee table, which was placed in front of a large sofa. They went down the hallway before arriving at Dash's kitchen. Immediately, she noticed a large glass terrarium with a tortoise pacing restlessly inside. There were small ruts in the dirt where the little green reptile had been walking in circles for hours. It had begun to worry Dash, so she decided she would ask Tank's former caretaker for advice. After all, that was her special talent. He won't stop running around his enclosure. Normally he's pretty still, but he hasn't stopped moving in hours. I tried letting him out of the cage so he could run around, and I figured that he might just want to explore, but that hasn't solved it. I wouldn't really care so much, but he hasn't eaten or drank since he started, and it's starting to scare me. Fluttershy had been half listening to the conversation, her mind stuck on the looming question she had been pondering. Rainbow Dash? Said Fluttershy. A hint of nervousness was audible in her voice. I've been hearing some rumors. Dash looked at Fluttershy with that same strange expression. That's a little off-topic, but what rumors? Well, about you and, Scootaloo. Dash's face contorted with confusion. What about me and Scootaloo? Dash spoke softly. Some ponies have been saying she's been sleeping here. Dash looked around as if to say, so? And her mother isn't, well... Fluttershy stopped and looked at the ground. She's not happy about it. Suddenly Dash took a defensive posture. Her mother's never happy about anything, and she treats Scootaloo like dirt because of it. Her face contorted with anger. I hate that miserable mare. Fluttershy's eyes widened with surprise. You can't just keep her from her mother. That's foal napping. She doesn't deserve to be called a mother. Dash was suddenly infuriated, her brow furrowing with anger as she stared into her friend's eyes. Why are you so interested in Scootaloo anyways? Rainbow Dash couldn't hide her anger. Fluttershy was now backing up guiltily. It's just that her mother is, well, suspicious of what you do with her all alone up here. I mean, it's not like you two are related, and... Fluttershy was struggling to speak. It just doesn't look right. Dash slowly put two and two together. You think that... Dash's face contorted into a sad visage. Fluttershy, how could you think that? The yellow mare quickly responded. No, I don't think that. It's just that... I do. A chestnut-colored Pegasus walked into the kitchen, a mean scowl plastered on her face. Rainbow Dash immediately recognized her, and suddenly, the sadness in her face turned to hostility. Dash looked between Fluttershy and the angry brown Pegasus, anger burning up inside of her. You brought that neglectful excuse of a mother here? The brown mare began to raise her voice. You sick little perverted muzzle out of my daughter's life, and off her flanks. Dash closed her eyes with anger. How dare this Pegasus accuse her of such acts? If I ever see you near my daughter again, I'll have you locked away, you lewd, sick-minded tramp. The teal Pegasus could feel the anger boiling inside of her, demanding that she did something to shut that filly-abusing parent up, when she felt the hatred and anger welling up in her hooves. You're lucky I don't have you locked away for this instant. I can't believe my own daughter was stupid enough to befriend you. Dash couldn't hold it back any longer. All she could think about was the marks and cuts that Scootaloo would come from school with every day, knowing full well that the mare responsible stood before her. This is for every bruise I've ever seen on Scootaloo's face. She lashed out with her hoof, her eyes closed in seething anger. She let her front leg dive into an unsuspecting cheek, and opened her eyes, raising her body up for another strike. She expected to see Scootaloo's mother in a heap beneath her, but instead, she only saw Fluttershy. The little yellow Pegasus had stepped in front of the rampaging Rainbow Dash as she lunged forward, and now she simply stared up at Dash, her eyes filled with shock, and her face completely horrified. Fluttershy! Dash managed to yell out in surprise. There was a red mark below her left eye, which slowly began to bleed a small tears of blood. There was a soundless pause that hovered in between the three as they all processed the scene that had just transpired. Dash would never forget her teary face as she stormed out of her house. The teal Pegasus tried to chase after Fluttershy, but she disappeared out of her door and flew away from her home. It would be 2 weeks before she saw Fluttershy again. After an extensive apology on Fluttershy's behalf, Dash found out that Scootaloo's mother had eavesdropped on an earlier conversation about Tank, and after finding about her visiting schedule, the chestnut-colored pony decided to take advantage of a yellow Pegasus's submissive nature by cornering her in an alley. She threatened to physically harm Fluttershy if she didn't lead her into Dash's home, and the yellow mare was forced into aiding the furious mother in her confrontation. Even Dash didn't blame her. Fluttershy couldn't help but think that she was responsible. If only she had stood up for herself and told that mean mare off, then none of this would have happened. But now, as they watched the moon steadily approach, they understood how little their issues really were. No matter what happened on that day, it would change absolutely zero in the end. I'm glad to have someone like you as a friend, said Dash, her teary grin trained towards Fluttershy. I don't think I'd be able to go through all this with anyone but you. The yellow mare closed her eyes and snuggled next to Rainbow Dash, just like they did on the cloud. Don't worry, Dash. We only have a few minutes left to go. The pair laid quietly against the rock, their eyes closed, their hooves around one another. In the end, they would be together as the moon fell.